with the check-in today. And so go ahead and just say your name. And then, you know, I want you to think back to when you were a teenager and tell me your favorite band. And this is, this helps the recording know who you are, and then it helps us with the transcripts. So I'm Sean Wilson, and my favorite band was Rush. Daniel?
Dan Hastings, Cheap Trick.
Richard?
I am a Rush fan, blood and blood. So,
Kristen?
I'm Kristen Diefenbach, and I'd probably have to go with the Police.
Chad?
Chad Cheney, probably Nirvana.
Mari?
I like the Rolling Stones.
Happy?
I'm probably going with Moby Grape or Humble Pie.
Patrick?
I'm Patrick Carey. I would say Pink Floyd.
Keith? You're muted there, Keith.
I am Keith Ketterer. It would be Motown first, and then it would be Led Zeppelin.
Robert?
Hi, it's Bob Reppert, and it would probably be Styx.
Jed?
Hi, Jed Kornblue and Fugazi.
Lester?
It's Lester Pardo with Boulder Junior Cycling. It would be The Cure.
So we're going through, just say your name and your favorite band from when you were a teenager. So John?
John Cheatham, probably AC/DC.
And Lynn?
Oh, man. Ingram, and favorite band as a teenager was probably the Jackson 5.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that. So I'm just trying to get people in the frame of mind for what we're going to do today. I'll go back through the slide deck. Most of you were on last time, but some of you weren't. And so we'll just kind of get everybody on the same page as to where we're at right now. And let me see if I can share my screen and get that up. Oh, you do not want that lecture. That has nothing to do with what we're doing today. I know I had it open. Oh, maybe I have to open it. Bear with me for a second. Sorry. I'm not as organized as I would like. There we go. Back over. And somewhere. Well, you're going to have to see this part of, this is what I was just doing. You'll have to bear with me while I get over to the correct thing here. There we go. So you should be able to see my window. Yes, no.
Yes.
Wait, so it's on the wrong thing. Oh, modern technology. Now you're going to see the jumbly mess that is my life. It's still saying it's not showing properly. Let's try this one. That should be better. So you can see the slide deck.
Not in a big ass black box.
Okay. There you are. You just popped out.
Black box, or do you actually see the slide?
You see your deck now.
Okay. Right. So, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to actually be going through the Google Doc link, and it's in the chat window. And I have some very specific facilitated questions that are in there that are really refinements of what we did last time. And just to orient everybody to what we do today, what we're going to do today, as Kristen went through in the first presentation, she talked about how there's different long-term athlete development models, and we're just using the American Development Model as our basic framework, and we're trying to see what our vision for our sport looks like within that framework. What we've come up with so far is that if you follow somebody's developmental age, and you probably can't see this too well, is if you follow their developmental age versus their capacity, is we want a continuity in this process across all the age groups, whether they're on a balance bike, which we talked about last week, or whether they're going all the way up into pedaling, training, and competing and whatnot. You want continuity in that process, and there needs to be a curriculum that goes with that. We're not trying to, build those out right now. We're just trying to understand what kind of critical components it will have within that. And our ultimate goal is to ensure that whoever comes into our ecosystem in cycling, we want them to continue for their entire lives. And in our last week's sessions, we went through balance bikes and pedal bikes, and we really talked about how those are just local programming. And now we're looking at this, and we came up with this kind of idea that, in the 4 to 6 year age groups, it's basically a safe, fun environment. And then when we get to the 7 to 12-year-olds, we're now looking at more exploration, and we even discussed having families involved in these kind of activities. And let's just jump over those slides. So the goals for that period is really to equate the bike with fun, but we had some other secondary things that we layered in there, which is getting the kids on bikes, introducing the bikes to the public, doing community outreach to counter ball-focused world. And then I think a really critical part of this that we don't have currently is we need to show that our sport is actually organized, much like everybody else. So we need to come up to an equal playing field with all of them. The qualities of the riders that come through those programs that we'd want to have them move forward, there's one critical thing. You want them to have the desire to be engaged. It's a personal choice, right? It's that introspective personal choice for those individuals. And we had a lot of discussion about how social engagement seems to be a large piece of that puzzle. So just to put it in a framework, is that really today we're talking about kind of this stage 3 training and some sort of competition, and there's some interesting things that we discussed. And when we look at it from kind of building out the ecosystem here, is that the only thing that we know so far is that these kids want to be here. That's our goal, and what we know. When we look at our entire ecosystem, we're very diverse, and we know this, and it makes for lots of opportunities for kids to be involved and engaged in the sport in the way that they want. And I think that makes us unique relative to the other sports, but that diversity, which is, I always view diversity as a strength, it's also part of our weakness. And it's a weakness for us because each of these individual units become silos, and they don't necessarily talk to each other very well. And so because of that, it provides us a lot of other barriers. And a key one that I always just bring up because it's easy is the NICA versus USA Cycling, lack of communication, even though they have, if you look at their missions from a very broad context, from that 40,000 foot view, is they're basically identical, is that we want more people riding bikes at the end of the day. And you could say the same thing about, the League of American Bicyclists, that we all have basically the same mission, but yet we have a lot of problems actually getting in the room and having real world discussions about how we overcome the barriers between us. So in terms of our framework, we always come back to that we want an athlete-centered universe, and as coaches, we want to be driving that discussion, and we want to be helping those athletes move forward using our toolkit. And when we think about what we're trying to do from a global context, is we're trying to take our passion and knowledge base and eventually develop processes that are sustainable for us, which is something that we don't really have in the sport. When we think about those processes, that's going to end up being probably that curriculum that's going to give us the continuity across all the framework. And we have to figure out how to make that sustainable. So that's kind of the ultimate goal. So now I'm going to jump over, and we want to jump over to Richard Wharton put out adventure. So that's another way of looking at it. We want to jump over to the Google Doc and open that up. and be able to work from that. I just dropped it back in there. So I think that'll be the easiest approach, is everybody just kind of open the Google Doc and get in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'll go through and kind of give just the highlights for what we discussed in the last session. And then I have things highlighted, as to what are some other discussion points, and they're just used as seeds that we can use to move the discussion forward. So when we look at this, from bridging, we're building to the future. When we talked about what age groups we were looking at, we're really talking about middle school and high school age kids, and we kind of felt that was just ADM level 3. Is there anything else to add to that? This is a very broad context, just what, like what kids are coming into these kinds of programs.
You've got kids who are almost ready to go to the pros, as well as kids who aren't at that level.
Well, that becomes, we're going to have the discussion about those kids next week. So that'll be another discussion, right? So right now we're just dealing with kids that are, in those age groups. And as I think Pete Weber brought up last week, is that we do have kids coming in at different age groups that we have to deal with that might be actually starting, just basically gaining access to the sport. And then on the other side of the equation, we have kids that, like you're saying, Happy, that are really moving forward and may end up in the pro ranks, right? And so we have to deal with that at some level, but we don't have to figure that out today. That's not our goal.
There's something we may want to add there that's an interesting conversation. I talk a lot with like USA Hockey, US Lacrosse, and some of those groups. And there's a really interesting piece here of kids at this age who are doing those sports that can't do them year round, either for access to facilities or some of those other things, and opportunities for conversational partnerships in our documents of what are the things that, because we'll get some of those kids that may stay in that sport for a little bit while it's organized, but so many of them eventually get pushed out. And if there's an opportunity for them to be riding their bikes as a way to stay fit for hockey. I don't know if anybody saw hockey's IM Potential video they made about 10 years ago, just as they were launching their ADM program. But it was a brilliant video that showed tons of kids riding their bikes and playing in parks, and really talked about that whole concept. And I think we missed something if we write this whole piece just straight to competition, knowing that so many of our kids may not compete until they get away from their families because of access and finances. But so many of them will come back in at potential college age with great athleticism.
Right, and we're seeing that now. I'm involved with DET programs and things at the Redlands Classic, and we're seeing a lot of crossover athletes that are either in college or even graduated from college, and they're coming from rowing. They're coming from other types of things that are endurance sport based. And
that's where you get most of your great female athletes. So many of our great women have come from a crossover perspective. If also you just go back 20 years, rowing and cross-country skiing and all this, before we got into hyper specialization, we actually had Olympians who were cross sports. So I think there's a movement going on right now in the applied exercise science world stuff that I do around anti-specialization, about more sport sampling and skill development that way. And we have such a potential as one of the foundational movement skills.
Okay, so we're a sport sampling.
We're sport agnostic. Yeah, we have the ability to be sport agnostic, quite amazingly so, for a lifetime.
One of the things I noticed when I was coaching at Columbia is the kids who didn't come in from cycling often made the most progress and had the least injuries as they
come with the least baggage.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's great, Kristen, to bring in those points and that we can highlight that as we move forward for that entry point for us. So, the next part of this is what are the primary goals and outcomes for these riders? And, a lot of this, what we came up with was revolving around social structure type stuff. And we talked a bit about more instruction, which would go over into the skills angles, but, things like pecking order of life, making sure they have continued interest, making sure there's group activities, that social engagement piece. But, can we refine on this a bit? Because, we want to talk about, also things related to training and building the engine, right? And skill-based, what about skill-based competencies? And then there's the life skills component. And so can we touch on some of these other components here in terms of the overall arching goals for these kids as they move forward in the sport?
So I do a lot of work on skills training, both with juniors and a lot with adults. And I feel like putting lots of focus on that is, especially in the younger age, is a tremendous plus for the kids, because that's an age where they're so malleable as far as learning those things so quickly and easily, right? They haven't learned fear yet, as adults usually bring, right? And it also gives us that ability to help them enjoy the sport. Like right there, you're building immediately on the foundation for life, of enjoying that sport. And if like, without putting an overemphasis on the training part, like the kids who really want to train and progress, they will seek that out. But if the skills development part isn't available to them, then that's always going to be a shortcoming.
Birth date, really important. Kids who are born in January, February, and March are bigger, stronger, and more coordinated because of the way school districts cut up the school year. So you get smaller kids toward the end of the year, not quite as well developed, not quite as mature. On the later in the year, and the kids who are born in the summer, kind of neutral.
I mean, so when we think about skills competencies, I don't want to go too far down in the weeds, but one thing that we've always considered is actually doing something like you do in like soccer, right? You go to a soccer camp and they have like a little worksheet, and it says, you like, here's the skills that you did well in, right? And the coach tells you like, yeah, you need to work on these things. I mean, does anybody use anything like that, be able to provide that level of feedback to the kids and parents and whatnot?
Not really. We did look into that one year, like a skills checklist that each coach and team would kind of check off, but it was just too much to manage, really. But it was good in training with the coaches, I guess. But yeah, as far as super young kids, I think the general goal of fun and teaching them how to be safe, how to explore, and how to do cycling as a group with their peers, their same age groups.
Put the wrong link in the thing. I've got to find the right one. There is some work from Dean Creelars up in Canada with checklists of that nature around physical literacy and fundamental skill development that we might be able to pull out the cycling specific elements that are part of that from an age developmental factor or perspective. I don't know, Sean, if you've had any dealings with Creelars.
No, I haven't.
He hangs out with Ballier and Richard Way and all those guys in that team of people. And he's been developing more stuff around this concept of physical literacy. And they have the Sport for Life group, and I pulled the wrong one. I said, I'm sorry about that. I pulled active instead of sport, but they have checklists. So I don't think that if we decided that there was something helpful there, we wouldn't have to recreate that wheel.
Yeah, and and like for us, we already have, skill-based competencies that we take the kids through, and those, I've always thought about, a really cool thing would be to have an app, right? You just, instead of being pen and paper, it's just an app, and then it can be distributed and it's easy to work with, right? And to check the kids off, kind of thing. But that's, that's kind of pie in the sky and further off. So moving from skills, so we know skill-based competencies is probably a real critical thing in these groups. But what about life skills? I mean, we had some discussion that came up about actually things regarding leadership opportunities and community engagement, even in the younger age groups. I mean, how important is that part of the puzzle with these kids in terms of a goal or an outcome?
If the kids will follow a kid as a leader, you can get a lot more out of them as a team than if you have everybody focusing on the individual rather than cooperating as a unit.
Now, Chad, I know you guys do, pretty much everything is team-based, right? In terms of what you do. So you have that piece pretty solid.
Yeah, we do our best. I mean, and every group is different, and so, but yeah, that is kind of the ground zero that we always come back to when our coaches are with the group, is that telling all the kids we're going to work together to all get better. So that's just kind of the bottom line.
I'm also thinking of things like, the, what is it, the teen trail building things and things of that nature, which are, often
Yeah,
like
totally.
engaging.
Yeah, we do try to get them out doing other things. Yeah, whether it's trash cleanup, there's a trail work week where they all go out with their coaches and do something different. So yeah, I mean, I think that's key with any kind of team at any level for sure. We do that at the college level as well.
I mean, the other part of this, that I always think about is, the situation we're kind of in our society where parents don't allow their kids to fail, right? They don't have those learning opportunities, and how important is that piece?
I think that's huge. We certainly encourage our coaches to talk and have sort of the parking lot discussion. This year we were doing it via Zoom following practices or team rides, sort of talking about the kids who are making mistakes and how they're growing from those mistakes and how we're coaching beyond that. So getting the kids to to learn how to sort of dispense with the mistake in practice, so that they're not making it in the race, and when they are making it in the race or the event, we're not going to talk about it right there, but we're going to certainly work on it in practice the following week. And skill development leading up to certain events is certainly something that we focus on. So if we know that there's a course that's going to a cyclocross course that's going to have a lot of sand, we'll encourage our coaches to go out and find sand that they can practice in. So skill mastery is definitely a big part of this age group.
Yeah, speaking for
If we look at,
go ahead.
I was going to say, if we look at where these kids are developmentally, what their age is and what's age appropriate, what's going on, that shift from, I mean, that's where a lot of that early LTD stuff came from, right? That what are they capable of doing and where are they capable of growing? And I think that has to factor into certainly across all the domains, physical, psychological, tactical, technical, cognitive, all of those things. There are elements that we can bring in. And I know we have a number of teachers in the group and people of educational backgrounds. And so there's a strong piece that can pull over that will inform what's appropriate for the kids of this level. It just sort of depends on how we're going to focus in and pull those pieces together.
Cooperation. This is a unique sport in that we're the only sport you have to work with the enemy to get over the finish line on many occasions. If you're breaking away, you need to cooperate with each other. The next thing you may be out to cut each other's throats and then work together again. And that puts us in a unique position as a sport.
And so here, I mean, we're just talking about those these are the global goals or outcomes that we want for the riders, basically the why are we doing this kind of thing. Is there anything else, kind of big picture that we need to add to this, or, we can just move on into the other things. So, I mean, this has been a good, healthy discussion. We've moved beyond just kind of that social engagement piece that we talked about last time.
Well, the way we look at it with BJC is that, the skill development is critical and kids love it, but we look at teaching life lessons through the sport. It's really the approach we have. Is actually on our website. That's what we try and do. And that team atmosphere is a critical change that we made consciously to try and create more of a sense of team and more of a sense of belonging. That's helped us immensely with both retention and with our growth. And that's something that we definitely in the age group that's pre-high school and for the high school group is as critical to us as any other component, that team sense of belonging. And particularly with, I said this the other week, keeping females in the sport, having that social and sense of team and sense of belonging has been huge.
I mean, we did have quite a bit of discussion about gender equity last time, you know, in the younger age groups, and you know, there seems to be, you know, two schools of thought, one being kind of a co-ed kind of program, and the other one, you know, kind of putting the girls over into their own environment. And there's certainly strengths and weaknesses associated with each. Does that kind of change when we move into these age groups? I mean, I'm you know, I'm a bench scientist. I don't work in those spaces very much.
Well, it's interesting. We've asked our female riders and say we're about 22% female, and what they prefer, and they tell us they prefer co-ed groups, but they seem to function really, really well when they're majority of their time in a girls only group with a great mentor female coach. We seem to get better development, better retention. But they all say they like to be part of the co-ed group. So we sort of split it off a bit. We do, you know, non-COVID years, we would be maybe doing some female groups and then combining them in, doing a combination of the two.
I have to run in just a minute, but just from that perspective, Sean, one of the things to be careful of as we do this, that as we think about gender or individuals with disabilities, that we do so in such a way that we're not creating this as cycling or sport and then for other, that we're talking about what are the commonalities across all individuals. And then there might be some interesting psychosocial special points for girls, but there are also just as many interesting psychosocial points for boys. There are interesting developmental factors for girls and for boys. And if you're not careful and you create this, oh, here's for girls, then this becomes the default for boys. And that's not really the case of it, especially given that we are into a world of a greater continuum of people and differences. And we have the potential in cycling, and we've already seen that. If, again, folks have been around for a long time, you know, we've seen this going back 30 years. We attract folks that may not go mainstream in sports because this sport allows for more of that. So being really mindful as we think about it, there are absolutely in the teenage and middle school years, places where physiologically and psychosocially, there are differences. And there's some good research to suggest the reason for keeping boys and girls apart, but also reasons for keeping them together. And so being mindful of that, but also making sure that we stick to the, and just to throw it out there, we're also talking about athletes potentially with disabilities, because the continuum doesn't call for just a singularly abled opportunities. And there is the great growth in the Paralympic movement and the opportunity for kids with disabilities to participate, even in some cases at the same level with individuals with abilities, because we're on a bike. So just that part of the conversation, but I do have to duck out. I will be back for tonight's.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah. Have a good day. Yeah, I mean, and just in general, you know, with like Kristen jumping out, right? That's kind of what I anticipated, right? Was that everybody has their own schedules, and you know, the more you can be part of the group, right? The more you can engage and the more you can assist. But you know, that's why I'm kind of working in this way where it allows for people to kind of jump in and out, and then you can also do things asynchronously, you know, by just looking through the documents and putting in your comments after the fact. All right, so is there anything else? I mean, that's kind of just the broad orientation for goals for this group, you know, like what kinds of basic things do we want to achieve? And, you know, a lot of these other things kind of drill more into some of those specifics. So if there's nothing else, I mean, because we've covered a lot of ground with the goals, and certainly tonight we can refine that a little bit more too. So I think that we've got a lot here that we can work from, unless somebody has something really specific they just think really needs to go down right now. All right, so moving on. So who's actually running these activities? And really what we came up with last time is we had a lot of discussion about schools. So, you know, it seemed like schools were the best approach for access to kids if we want to try to get the largest numbers. But clearly, you know, we have groups on here that are running community-based programs. So we know that that's important as well, an important piece of this overall puzzle. And there were some things in here, you know, that I'm not sure if I'm the only one who brought it up, but other people, that we have this traditional club model where a lot of us started that was mixed ages and genders and whatnot. And, you know, even hybrid across the sport, you know, in terms of different disciplines. But it seems like like the youth specific clubs, much like Boulder Junior, CCAP, and Durango Devo are on the call, are the way for us to, prevent the continued erosion of kind of that youth market and of the numbers of people that are really part of the sport in a large way, those lifetime people. But it seemed like there could be also a lot of room to interface with other types of organizations, such as the YMCA. I would also say Boys and Girls Club fits in that spot. And somebody even brought up using scouting troops because they already have a badge for cycling, as there may be some engagement points there for some sort of collaborative interactions between, community-based clubs and scouting and things like that. And then there was some discussion about using merit badges and things like that we might be able to bring into the mix. And that's in that last paragraph. What I wanted to kind of focus in on now was, we didn't really discuss, these already existing national entities. And I just put Trips for Kids and Little Bellas down. And how do those silos interface with, say, Boulder Junior? I'm just looking at Lester, how do those types of silos interface with our other existing clubs?
Well, for us specifically, we sometimes share facilities, sometimes at the local bike park, and we have some crossover with coaches, but there's not a lot of interaction between the two. We get a lot of riders who maybe were introduced to the sport through Little Bellas, and then we'll come over to BJC. But there's not, we don't sit down and have a monthly meeting or anything like that with them, and we're working very separately, but similar goals, and we just sort of complement each other. I refer people to Little Bellas all the time and vice versa. Yeah.
So it's more of a friendly, I wouldn't say you have a collaborative relationship, but you have a synergistic relationship where you can feed off of each other to a certain extent.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think Little Bellas works great as an introduction program. Over the years, we've progressed. I get less and less riders who are brand new to riding or brand new to mountain biking coming into the sport, where 6-7 years ago, I would have a lot of it. I think a lot of kids are maybe going to something like the Little Bellas program, getting an exposure, or they're riding more with their parents, but they're getting exposure there. And what I like about Little Bellas and what I like about programs like that is that it's a sequential thing, not just seeing the kids once at a bike rodeo and it's overwhelming. It's a chance for them to actually get to know the kids and work through a series of skills and lessons over a number of weeks, which is how we base, and I know Durango Devo does too, our younger programs off of it, that we want to see the kids 6, 7, 8 times in a row with the same coach to develop a relationship.
And so and that goes back into that social piece where you have that kind of engagement, not just with the coach, but also between the athletes, right?
Yeah, and it sort of buys them in. It's I can't remember what the stat is with food with kids, but they try a new food, they don't like it, but you have to offer them the food a number of times before they'll like it. I think they get used to the idea of coming riding 5-6 times. They look forward to it if it's a positive experience, and it becomes part of routine. Whereas the one-off like bike rodeo where there's 500 kids and one poor coach going, oh my God, what's happening, doesn't create the same atmosphere and the same sense of belonging.
Right. Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
I do. Sorry. That's kind of what I'm looking at with the Let's Ride program and how to make it effective, is that I want to make sure that we're connecting with the right programs in the different areas, because obviously the Let's Ride program is a 1 to 2 hour experience for the elementary school kids, but looking at where to send them next, the next stop, is something that I'm really trying to figure out right now, and how to work with the existing programs to make it successful so that they're not just trying a bike and getting overwhelmed. So Lester, that's really important to me, and I would love to talk more about it to understand how you all think that something like that could be successful.
I mean, that's certainly something we could do, is, just a special conversation amongst the group, and you had talked about bringing together the groups, and I'm one of them. And I think Jed is also one of them that provided information to you guys to
Mhm.
assist
I'm
that. But
going through it all.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We have the 5 pilot areas, and but that is definitely something. I don't want to just have these Let's Ride programs going out there, getting kids on bikes and having nowhere to be sending them, for the next steps, because it's definitely a big part of like what we're trying to accomplish is retention.
Right. And that, I mean, I don't know where this, maybe it was in
I
last.
know this was the
week's stuff.
earlier discussion and not the middle school age, but
Yeah, but some of the same rules apply. Like, if they go through like a Little Bellas, you want to make sure that there's something else for them to engage with, right? And clearly in Boulder, you have those things that happen, but there may be areas where things like Little Bellas exist, or a Trip for Kids where they're already doing things, but then there's no next, right? And so that can become, from a holistic perspective, that becomes a location now that you would want to focus in on and say, okay, how do we build out more structure or something like that?
Yeah.
But that's not really the purpose of what we're trying to do today. That's those are more refined questions for later on. And so we do want to have, so it seems like, based on what Lester was talking about, that we have these other national entities, we want to engage with them, and we have to be mindful of what their goals are and try to figure out where we can have the overlaps and natural engagement points. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, one thing that I've seen really successful here is some of the NICA teams, their female captains will also volunteer in the Little Bellas chapters in this sort of time. So they get this kind of this mentorship, but they get this connection, and they see that back and forth. And kind of speaking towards that, I wanted to just make a point towards the leadership and life skills part of that as well, is that I think that is a lot of times kind of overlooked in cycling. And, sometimes the captain structure and things like that, and the team leader thing is really, really powerful for those kids. And teaching them kind of the value of service to little kids or to other people early on is very important.
Right. And that's what kind of came out even at, talking about 10-year-olds, right? It seemed like even in those age groups, it was important to start instilling those behaviors. So, that's a good segue, John, into this next point, which is who are the coaches for these riders? We didn't even discuss, who those would be. Last time we talked about, with little teeny kids, they, using college students, U23s, or even, teenagers is adequate for them. But now we're talking about, the teenagers that are taking on those leaderships to mentor the little kids. Who coaches them? We want it to be a college student U23, or should it be some old guy like me, right? Or those of us who are sitting around the table? Are we the appropriate coaches, or do we need a second layer in between us and the kids?
I can jump in and talk about that one a little bit if you want. With BJC, I deliberately have a wide range of coaching ages and genders and skill levels and coaching types, and it works really, really well. Definitely need an age difference between the athletes and the coach. You're running into trouble if you have a 17-year-old athlete and a 17-year-old coach and 14-year-old athletes. But we mirror our athlete development program with a coaching education program. So I partner the younger coaches up with a more experienced coach, and as they gain experience, they get their own group. But we have equal success with having kids ride with a 20-year-old who can shred and do amazing things on the bike as they do with a 50-year-old who has great teaching skills, and everyone's got something to offer, and it comes to matching the right group with the right coach.
Anybody else have anything to add to that? Chad? Is Chad back there somewhere?
Yeah, no, I was listening. Not really. It depends on what you have available, but I personally think the more relevant to the team, the more relevant coach, as in writing skills and what those kids if the coach can possess the skills the kids want, you're going to have quicker success. But yeah, any age does work for sure, like Lester was saying. Just
So it
that.
seems like it seems it comes down to more coaching competencies in this case, rather than, you know, that kind of, I don't know what, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's like you know, having like a direct role model or peer that you look up to, right? With the little kids, you know, they're looking at the teenagers and going, oh, I want to be like them. You know, that's really super important to me. It seems like at this stage, maybe that's a little less important.
Well, I think it's important, but we're in a situation, the level of riders that are coming to the program are much better than they were even 4 or 5 years ago. I have a lot of our coaches working with, who work for us, working with one of our higher level jump coaches or enduro coaches to get the skills they need to be able to ride with 10, 11-year-olds, because the 10, 11-year-olds, what they're capable of riding now compared to 5 years ago is night and day different. And so we're finding we're having to bring the coaching skill level of the coaches up and their riding skill of the coaches up to meet it. So definitely I agree with Chad, like having relevant coaches. Your coaches have to, for the most part, be able to walk the walk. You know, they need to be able to do it and do it safely and have a good understanding of it themselves.
Yeah, we're sort of in the same boat here, Lester. As far as the last 4 or 5 years, I've been coaching with CCAP for 4 years now, and we've watched the development really grow. So we're now reinvesting in our coach training and bringing in some private instructors for things that we just skill sets we don't have, and we recognize that, but we want our coaches to have, because our kids are now stretching into enduro and want to be a part of the Eastern States Cup. So we want to make sure they're prepared. So we have to make the investment. Some of the coaches might not be interested in that level of training, and that's fine. We're actively looking for ones who are, and trying to keep those other coaches engaged in some meaningful way.
Yeah, I actively went after some enduro coaches, some enduro riders who with the right personality in order to help with that coaching, and that's allowed that side of the program just to boom.
So it seems like even at this stage, even though there may not be fully in a performance track, is now you have even specialization within the coaches to a certain extent to meet the demands of the ridership.
For sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to agree there for sure at this level. I think the middle school is kind of the last group where you could have all kinds of ages, you know, coaching the group. I think when you turn to high school, it's harder. You know, the coaches just have to be that much more specialized at this next level.
Okay. So moving on from that, that's good. That's a good discussion. That really gets us kind of going in that direction. So thinking about this next question, which is, you know, we didn't really discuss it so far for these kids, is what about varsity school sports programs, and using that as a way to enhance participation? I mean, we've certainly had a lot of instances where kids have actually been specifically pulled out of our program because we can't offer a letter, you know, that the parent goes, you have to go into a sport where you can letter in high school. And so they just remove kids that are, you know, these are kids that are enjoying it, right? They want to ride their bikes, and their parents basically telling them, no, you got to find something else. We don't care what it is, but it just can't be cycling because they can't offer that. Any thoughts about that part of the equation?
I've got nothing to add. I didn't grow up in the States with the whole letter sports system, so it was foreign to me. I know we do struggle here with the biggest high school that my daughter rides for has 150 kids, but it's a club program. It's not part of the school sport program, which, you know, administrative costs and stuff like that aren't covered. It'd be nice if it was a school sport in a lot of ways. I think that'd be a huge, I don't see many downsides to it.
Look, I just raised 2 kids in a fairly affluent area, and one of the biggest challenges I saw with the kids is high school was just one thing, but when you talk about a letter, what those kids are doing is building a resume, because they're trying to get into top tier colleges, and I think that's kind of what makes parents kind of push. It's not saying, hey, you got to get a letter because I want you to have something cool to wear to your high school reunion. It's you need something to sit on your resume or something to put on your resume that you're active, because the schools, especially the well-known schools, are getting more and more competitive about the requirements to get in. So
But the pool
you
of
got to take
kids
it
who,
from that. Huh?
the pool of kids who actually get letters in these
Yeah.
schools is very small, considering the size of the school usually, unless you got a school that has 86 kids on a football team. I mean, most schools don't carry those huge numbers anymore, so only a small percentage will get a letter. On the other hand, as a bike racer, you can get to see much of the country as a kid, and you have opportunities that,
That's true.
you know, there is a trade-off, and that's, as us as coaches have that discussion with the parents. I mean,
But
I know that I race bikes and canoes. You can imagine how I stood out in my world.
I mean, that's completely valid, Happy, but when you go back to the point that, that you're using it as a resume builder, and I've heard this from parents also, is that they actually do get, some sort of kudos when they try to go forward into college by having a letter in a sport, and you're just not going to get that from cycling, at least in most locations.
But most schools require 4 years of completion in the sport to do it, and not everybody does the 4 years. If you're down for one with an injury, you don't get the letter. My brother was a letter sports athlete, played basketball, tennis, and soccer.
Well, I'm just looking at, when we look at the threat, the broad scale threat is that we have, kids, we have a variety of different sports vying for the kids. And if we were in the schools, we would have better access to those kids. And if we were able to letter, then we would, that would raise our bar in terms of, being able to gain access to the kids. That, parents.
I just looked online here for schools in the Boulder area, and it's not a CHSAA sport, so it's not recognized, but the high school riders can now earn varsity letters. It says right here in big bold print on one of the team's pages. I don't know if that's a new thing or not.
Hey, everybody, this is Bruce Martins. I used to be the coach licensing director for the National Interscholastic Cycling Association. I've been kind of just hanging out, listening for the last couple of sessions here. High school cycling at a high school level is a letter sport for many, many states and schools within those states. So just so you know that this wheel has been invented, there are lots of opportunities for kids to letter. Minnesota, we have kids racing at a high school varsity level at 6th grade if their competence is there. Literally kids earning high school letters in 7th grade in a varsity sport if their level of performance is there. So just so you know, that precedent is set. There are protocols there. If you're looking for systems or ideas, we have all of those developed.
Great. I mean, that goes into the heart of the equation, Bruce, is that, when we're looking at it, and I can talk to Redlands, right, is Redlands doesn't care. They don't care about the kids riding bikes. They don't give letters for it. But if we had a system that we could use to be able to push that forward, and maybe it comes from the level of either NICA on one side or from USA Cycling on the other, to be able to say, hey, we understand that you have riders in your school that are, racing bikes. We would like them to have letters, right? So it's not just coming from me as a director. Because when I go to a school, they basically blow me off as a director. But if I had like USA Cycling or NICA directly behind me when I walk in the door to say, here's how it's done. We're a national organization. We want it to happen, right? That has a little bit more weight than just me walking in as a team director.
Yeah, and those are really managed by the individual coaches having those conversations with those schools and the administrators there. I mean, that is a school decision. Oftentimes they can supersede state high school league precedent if they want to. They have the authority to issue letters and accolades at their discretion.
Right. So, I mean, to me, it seems like a worthwhile endeavor to push down those roads. I mean, I just want to, kind of get the overall feeling from the group, and especially when we, kind of move this into like a white paper document or something like that.
I think this is a great reason or a great golden opportunity for you to push this towards the middle schools. And something that I really enjoyed pre-COVID was riding with my stepson's middle school team for the last couple years and kind of dialing down the NICA experience all the way to the middle school level, right? Which was even more beginnery, which was kind of fun. But if you get enough parents that are hooked at the middle school level, so we were doing things like after ride barbecues and things like that. And the more that you get the parents hooked at that level, then the more you're going to get those parents when their kids go to high school saying, hey, where's the club program? Why can't my kid get a letter? Why can't my kid get a letter? Let me talk to the vice principal or whatever. Let me talk to the athletic director. Let's talk about this. You're going to get that upward pressure, not just from one cycling coach, but from 60 parents, and then the next year, 90 parents.
Hey, John, how did you get the kids interested in the ones that you were having in the middle school, that you guys were getting together and stuff that you're talking about?
It was there already. They have a PE teacher that has led the program for like 10 years. So, and he's a pretty regular guy. He's not like a real cyclist or anything like that. He just puts it together. I think both his girls actually play water polo, so completely different. And then I was just helping out. So, it's really, I think centering it in the middle schools. I don't know if you probably saw the stuff with like at the Outride Summit. One of the presenters was a middle school teacher from Florida. And she was talking about just all the stuff that they had done and kind of built that into a year-round program. And that's, not a place like, I live in Marin County, right? It's like center, but someplace that, like Florida, you're not really thinking about that, but they're building that upwelling.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Any other discussion around this area? I mean, really, we were talking about, who's the coach and, where, like who's actually running these activities? Is it, a school-based program, community-based program? And, we're getting a little bit off topic, but that's okay.
One thing that I would like to add quick before I shut my mouth again here is, just like every sport, as the more credentialed you are as a practitioner or the coaches are, the better the potential to be recognized by those administrators and taken seriously by the people who are going to actually support, this development system. The U.S. There's an international coach accreditation outline that Kristen actually has talked about quite a bit. It's 48 domains and 40 standards that every athletic coach needs to attend to if you're going to seek that accreditation as a professional coach. I really advise everyone to look those over and start to maybe look at what those competencies are and how you as a group may start to formalize systems to address some of the gaps in those. For example, just basically establishing a coach philosophy. I mean, if you were to go out and ask a lot of the cycling coaches right now, what is your theoretical orientation? What is your method for coaching? They wouldn't even know what you're talking about. They may say, I like to do these things or go to a disciplinary perspective, but literally they don't know what a theoretical orientation is. And if you don't have a coach method or a philosophy, you're not going to be taken seriously in the mainstream. And so I think one of the things as you're looking at who these coaches are is what are they about and what level of competence are they, not just from a certification or an accreditation, but just understanding the dynamics of the whole person athlete. So the biopsychosocial model. So I think that's the biggest thing that, from a NICA perspective, that when we were launching our coach accreditation model was how do we make sure that we're not just attending to the physical, but the psychological and social aspects of development of the youth and how the coach's role is within that system.
Yeah, I think one of the outcomes of this discussion here, right, which is really, we're just talking about the continuum of the athlete moving along that pathway, is we're gonna see that we do have to reorient the entire coaching education piece, and that'll come later, right? So that's not part of what we're dealing with right now, but it's an important consideration. There's some other very big, there's a big lift, right, that has to go along with that. And people like Bruce have already kind of done this, and we may be calling back on you, Bruce, for for some of that part of the equation. But those are things that we're well aware of, and we know that those need to be dealt with. But this seemed like the natural first step, is to figure out what that continuum looks like, and then we can say, okay, how do we layer a coaching education piece on top of it that makes sense, given what we've just constructed in terms of what does our ecosystem actually look like. All right, so if there's nothing else to really add in this space, I mean, we've covered quite a bit, in terms of who's running the activities and who the coaches are. When we get into the next piece, which is kind of far down, there's a lot of other information typed in there, is where are these activities run? I mean, so all we only talked about local programming, but when we're looking at this age group, these middle school through high school kids that are just, really engaging in the sport, they're loving it. We're trying to move them forward. And, we know that they're driven, right? That's the key thing. And we know that we're trying to build skills competencies now. We're trying to do some other things around their psychosocial components and whatnot. And maybe building out the capacity. We really didn't talk much about that part of the equation. But where are we running these? I mean, it seems like local is preferred. We talked about that, getting the kids to build fitness. And we talked about not really traveling all that much to go to bike races. But what is an appropriate travel distance time for these? The NICA models, you only have a few events. They're located reasonably close by. They might be a couple hours away. And then do we actually layer on any kind of national or international experiences to build life skills? I mean, the way I've always approached it with my kids, and I tell them flat out, is we're here to give you enrichment, right? So that you become a more well-rounded human and you're building life skills, right? None of the things that they've ever done in the sport have been hyper-focused on the performance per se. It's on the process of actually doing these activities. For example, you might say, oh, let's take the kids to Europe and do a bike tour, right? That could be part of this type of matrix. So where are these activities run? What does that look like?
I mean, schools, parks, trailheads, and then instead of thinking outside of just races, like weekend ride trips, like we do like shred trips for middle school kids. At like the 5th grade level, we've done some big, for the advanced kids, we'll do like a big shuttle day. They'll do like a 3-hour ride or something a little big for them. So more like challenge or camping group experiences instead of races for the middle school age. But like schools and in-town parks, if you can get bikes on grass, if your area lets you permit parks for grass.
I mean, so this is all local. This is still pretty much a local space, which is counter to, the traditional racing model and counter to a lot of what youth sports looks like in general. I mean, even, as 10 and 12-year-olds are driving all over Southern California to do soccer games and stuff like that, or doing softball or baseball, whatever the sport happens to be. They're all travel team oriented.
I know in New England this year, last year and this year because of COVID, it's sort of forced our hand to make everything local again. And I'm kind of excited about that. We get the same interaction with the same families, or interaction with the same families week after week, and we're building that relationship at either our crits, our cyclocross series, or our mountain bike series, and we're also building continuity. So they're getting used to coming to the same place, and they're establishing those rituals. And if larger events pop up, like a multi-state series in the fall or even into 22, they'll already have that skill set.
Yeah, I think it should be local. I know one of the Devo groups that I help with, one of their big kind of peak things that they go towards is having a camping trip on Mount Tam where they ride up one day, camp overnight, and then ride down the next day. Also, they have what they call the Shorty series here that's very close to my house, and it's basically all aimed at middle school kids. They have some like high school classifications and old man classifications, but pretty much it's aimed at those middle school age groups where I think they have a 6th and a 7th and an 8th grade race. And those are full. I mean, they're like 30 kids in each one. So very closed course kind of situation. And those are like viewed with a lot of pride. Like, believe me, the middle school coaches are all looking at those at those Google sheets of the standings every week, just like we would be looking at something, you know, at a national level or something like that, right? So I think you can keep it very small and maybe very much more refreshing than doing something like a travel team kind of situation for anybody that's parented through that.
We actively encourage parents and riders under the age of 14 to not travel, definitely out of state, unless they happen to be visiting relatives and there's a bike race. We don't want to be too serious too soon, so we try to keep things local, similar to some of the stuff that like Chad and Jed have mentioned. Not so much the camping trips anymore because we've gotten a little bit big for that, but we do a camp week where instead of your regular ride, we're going to take the kids for 5 hours. It's going to be somewhere different. The parents have to drive to maybe an hour away to give them a different experience and bond that way. But yeah, we try to discourage the racing being so serious that the kids are traveling out of state or multiple hours, to get there.
Yeah, Lester, to add to that, we're sort of shifting our junior travel team program to meet that need. We're trying to make them give back and be more of our coaches in training in the future, since we know we might not have much regional racing this year. I think it's going to improve the program altogether. I don't know if this is the right spot for this, but what about virtual spaces? I have 40 kids who are going to start warming up for a Zwift ride tonight that I've got to jump out for. So that's become a pretty incredible meeting space for us this winter. The kids are communicating on Discord, and the conversations are absolutely ridiculous, and I love it. They're not talking about bike racing, even though Ben Wolf, who's our coach for this program, is leading them on a guided workout, and I'm parroting everything he's saying and trying to keep the kids focused. They're having a great time, and they're building their own community. These are kids from all over our program. So we'll have 5 kids from one team, 2 kids from another team, and they're all now forming this bond that they're going to carry right in the mountain bike season. It's going to be pretty awesome to watch these kids meet in person.
We used Swift and stuff like that a lot in the spring. Our kids are deliberately off the bike right now, except for a couple who are racing early off the bike. We actually started strength training workouts tonight. It's our first one off the bike for 7 weeks. But we used Swift and something similar when we were shut down with COVID in March last year. Huge success. We had 75 kids on a ride on a regular basis.
Awesome.
And some racing too.
Yeah, I know Stuart had talked about putting together a series for USA Cycling, but it hasn't materialized. I think he's been off doing some other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think Zwift is an amazing community building platform. And I think it's great that the juniors are using it and having fun at it. We're working on it.
Yeah, I'm helping with a high school. I lead 2 rides a week, and it's the only thing that I'm running into is tech issues.
Yeah.
And especially, if you have a kid that's like on a state of the art smart trainer, it's a lot easier. If you have somebody that's like with a couple sensors and some older trainer, it can get. I do a lot of tech support every week, but it's growing slowly. But I think the potential is fantastic right now for that, and like racing and everything like that you could do is wonderful.
Yeah, we did start doing some discussions around this space kind of at a high level, and brought in stages to see if we can start reducing those price points down to make it really reasonable, instead of having to buy like an expensive Wahoo trainer or something like that. Can we can we find a way, right? You know, and especially, you know, thinking about the DEI type of equation, and, you know, what does it look like to try to set up, you know, kind of a facility that you can do these things at once we're post COVID. And a lot of those are, you know, they're kind of sizable hurdles, and, you know, I don't know, it'll take us a while to really get down that road, to be able to do it, but there's certainly ways to have the kids engaged. Anything else about where these are run? I mean, it looks like everything is still focused really on local is preferred. I mean, we haven't even, you know, nobody really touched on, you know, the idea of having a few regional events that are like more bucket list or something, you know, that might be further away. I mean, you know, that's really, it seems like the model that Nike is using, right? Is, you know, they're further, you know, they have these events that are further away, and you don't have very many of them, instead of having, you know, our traditional free market enterprise within USA Cycling doesn't really work, right? You know, within this type of framework. And that's, you know, kind of the target audience, you know, is you want new kids that are coming into the sport, and you want them to move forward, and you want to give them interesting, fun things to do, whatever that happens to be. And it just seems like having something that's a little more regionally based might be that kind of thing. You drive them out, you have them do that activity, and then you bring them back, whether it's, you know, doing a shuttle trip or shred ride, like what Chad was talking about, or something that may be more organized than that, like a, you know, Fondo, gravel grinder, those types of activities. I mean, how does that fit into the matrix?
Yeah, I think any group would just want a goal at the end, and sometimes the goal is pushing the group's, you know, experience and boundaries a little bit. So leaving town for a middle school is kind of like, you know, pretty big time. Whereas like a high schooler might need something more extreme.
Does anybody monitor academics of the kids on the team?
Well, NICA has a certain grade point average you have to hold to participate in the races, maybe even practices, but as a program, we don't really monitor academics.
We do for our travel program.
When I was at Columbia, we also created study groups for on the van and bus, so that my kids knew we weren't going to win nationals, but we were going to be the highest paid graduation group in the conference. Yeah, although Harvard used to argue that with us.
I think with Outride, one of the things that I saw in that summit that I went to, and some of the documents that I've seen, is that they've been seeing improvements in the grades, and they've been seeing improvements in, especially when you get into attention deficit disorders, different or syndromes, or whatever we're going to call it. That they've been seeing a lot of improvements as kids go through those programs. And those are really nice documented papers on that stuff. Anyway, so I deal with that a lot. As far as kind of going into more of a regional thing, Sean, one thing I'm interested, I know you do some stuff around the SoCal League, and NorCal is going to have more, looks like they're going to have more venues with camping coming up, and they're going to bring their middle schoolers out. So they're going to have a middle school race, looks like the day before, kind of like Southern California does. I think that's an exceptional way, kind of like what Chad was saying about having a little more adventure to those kids. One of the things that I find is really special is when a whole family can go somewhere for a weekend, and the little Groms race run one day, and then they just run around on their bikes the whole next day while their older siblings are racing. I think it's a wonderful way to spend a weekend. Yeah.
Okay. And we've got quite a bit here, and, you know, we'll refine this a little bit more this evening too, for those who come on the call. I mean, I do, you know, one thing we did kind of skip over, I want to go back to, is the idea of the Outride program. And I do interface with them directly. I actually have a grant with them. So that's, you know, I'll just put that out there, you know, but, you know, those types of school-based programs, I think, are an important part of the matrix, you know, is that you drop a load of bikes at the school, they do whatever the school-based curriculum is, and now you can provide opportunities to interface, say, you know, I'm looking at Lester, he's right here in front of you, interfacing a middle school program in Boulder with BJC, and then they can have some sort of way of migrating those kids off of campus and into, these community-based programs. Are there any thoughts about that? I mean, that's a piece of the puzzle I've been trying to understand for quite a while. And, I think we're still off the mark on that.
Something we're going to try and do this year is there's a couple of local middle schools and elementary schools that have a very active bike club. We're going to have one or two of our coaches go there on a regular basis, just to get to know kids, just so we don't want to reinvent what's already happening. We want to assist them. If they would like our help, to have another coach there. And hopefully we're going to see that acts as a great, some of the bridge the gap to get those kids to come from that school to come ride with us because they know a coach, there's a relationship. But we're doing it more as our real intent is more of a community service, just to help out, get more kids on bikes. And some of the schools are having trouble recruiting, ride leaders at the elementary and middle school level. So let's help out.
Yeah, in Durango, we run we don't run the bike rodeos because each school has their own coordinator for their bike day or a rodeo, but we ask to be involved in all of them. And then we pay a couple coaches to go and run the different drills and the stations, like helmet safety and bike check, and then the different skills games. And then the interested ones, you can tell there's the kids that brought their own school. We try to promote Devo, give them all Devo stickers. But I think since they're at school and their parents aren't there, it's just a experience for them. They ride their bike for their little 45-minute window, if that. Sometimes it's 10 minutes at some of the rodeos. And then they go right back to school. And I think some of the schools allow Devo to give all the parents a little informative pamphlet on cycling and how to join Devo and just a general description of some of our groups. But some schools don't do that. They're just no, you just have your time out there with the kids. So our coaches try to identify the kids at the actual event and be like, hey, you're really interested, or hey, you really have skills, let's get you a bike. But it's just the kid there. You can't tell it to the parents. So I think just getting info to the parents through the school is the biggest roadblock, mostly because the schools can only give so much information to the parents legally. It has to be okayed by the school first, and then so you got to have someone in your organization working with the schools and being hey, cycling is legit. There's high school, there's people doing it everywhere. Here's the info to get the interested kids involved, and show them that it is a sport like the other sports they're doing after school, like soccer and lacrosse and swimming and ballet.
We've had a similar experience. We try to go through the PTAs, and we'll start. We have basically a heat map of areas that we're not really serving, or of areas where we know we have a coach who might be leaving or moving on. And so we'll develop a relationship with the PTA, and they might sponsor a day for us to come in, or a PE teacher will sponsor us for a day to come in. Traditionally, we've had a pair of very aged CompuTrainers, and basically a video that I shot of one of our local training crits on a loop using Performance Pro Studio. And we'll have kids get on and race that lap and see who gets the best time. But because of COVID, we were afforded an interesting opportunity this year. We're going to start showing up with a trailer full of bikes and sort of run an older version, an age-appropriate version rather, of the Let's Ride camp for middle school and high school kids. I actually just found out today that our sponsor is giving us 18 bikes, which is exactly what I asked for. It's awesome. So Cannondale stepped up in a big way, and we're purchasing the trailer in the next couple of weeks. So I'll have some data points for this group on how that program went and what kind of engagement we get, and if we're actually able to build out some teams or add to our regional team rosters from that program.
Yeah, so I mean, along those lines, I've been talking with iRide, which is out of British Columbia, and they're in quite a few schools and been using that general approach. And I haven't seen all the data, but their approach is to do exactly that. They go to the schools, they run these programs. They're actually paid by the school to run the programs. And then they go from that to, the goal is like, if there's enough engagement, right, you get enough engagement at that school and enough, forward momentum, then you try to develop that community club piece. And I'm not sure how much success they've had with it. They do have these things on their website, so you can kind of see what they're doing. But, these are very, you're talking about very long time spans, right? I mean, we're talking, they've been around for 5 years. They're in 30 odd schools now doing stuff. But, that community engagement piece it's being very, very slow to develop.
Well, something along those lines, prior to working for BJC, I worked for the Salt Lake Olympic Committee, overseeing a lot of sport development programs for the Winter Olympic sports with the Board of Education there. And we used a model of, go to the schools, talk about the sports, and then give them a opportunity to try the sports, whether it be curling, speed skating, in a dry land, non-ice formation. And then the kids could follow up if they wanted to and come to an Olympic facility to try the sport for free. And what I found generally across the board with school-based programs, you almost get overwhelmed. There's so many kids there. You're not getting, like Chad talked about, wanting to grab the kids and the kids who are really into it, to bring their own bike and try and grab them. Is that with the school-based programs, it sort of gets so watered down. You're dealing with kids who don't want to be there, kids who are just kind of interested, some kids who are really interested, and it's not focused enough, is generally speaking. We saw a lot of more success with recruitment when I worked for the Olympic Committee in Salt Lake with community-based things where kids were coming who had already shown an interest for the sport, than getting kids from the schools to be engaged in the sport long-term. That was just, and that was we did it across 20 different sports between two of us. And that was the finding.
And so were those like single day type things? Because we've talked a little bit about, that you have to have those multiple contact point days in order to really generate enthusiasm.
Yeah, to give you an example, like we do this with curling or speed, like curling would be a great example. We would go into a school, and we'd set up for 6 different Olympic sports. We'd have curling stones on wheels, luge on wheels, rollerblades. Kids could try 3 or 4 different sports over a span of 2 gym periods. So we were there for the week, and so each kid twice, and then they were given the opportunity to come try those sports. We only took equipment to the schools that had a facility close to them where they could do that sport. But it was the lack of engagement. Like we saw them once or twice, and again, it was overwhelming. The kids who were really, really into it, it was hard to grab them and spend any time with them, because you spend all your time, with 30 kids, correcting the kids that are goofing off and not into it. And so we found when we moved to a community-based program that was a small fee, we had more success with recruitment, because we'd have those kids come in for that 4 to 6 times, maybe 4 to 6 weeks in a row, to really learn the skill and be a little bought into it. I think one of the things with cycling, we talked about earlier, is not getting kids on bikes. Most kids in the States do learn, I don't know what the stats are, do learn to ride a bike. It's keeping them engaged with riding a bike is the issue.
Great. No, that's really helpful to understand. I mean, because that's something that we just globally, I don't think we understand very well. What does that engagement piece like?
Yeah, and I have no stats on it, but that was our what we just end up defaulting to was like, let's do community outreach instead of school outreach.
Great.
You want to get the people who are interested in it to come and become more interested.
Okay. Anything else to add? I mean, we've kind of covered a lot of ground there in these different spaces, and the types of activities they do. I mean, we've touched on a lot of it. I mean, a lot of it still has not really focused in on competition per se. I mean, we've talked about camping trips, shuttle trips, shred rides, but I know that like CCAP is running event-based programming. I run event-based programming, but there's also all these non-competitive events that could be layered into something. I mean, you could just take the NICA model and basically say, okay, let's convert all those NICA races now into gravel grinders, or whatever, epic mountain bike rides, right, with the kids and the parents. I mean, there's different options available to us. I mean, we're a very diverse sport, right? We don't have to go into any one of those buckets. We can use the different things that are available to us. Because it seems like the goal is to generate more excitement, more enthusiasm in the kids, and to keep them actually wanting more and to come back. So what does that space look like? What does our event, kind of event space look like once we get beyond just skill building, doing rides for training and things like that?
Well, I think one of the key things, I mean, that NICA does so well, you go to a NICA event here in Colorado, it's all about the kids. When I go to other mountain bike events, like Winter Park Resort has a race series all summer, and they have a kids race, it's an afterthought. There is a group here that's been putting on some junior development races and having something that's really specific for the juniors as the right length is the right ability. And I mean, I've been to a ton of races where there's a junior race where the kids have to sit around for 3 hours, get the rewards, and there's nothing for them to do because it's more about the seniors and the adults racing than the kids. So I think that's where NICA does such a fantastic job, is that those events are, in the Colorado League, those events are for the kids and it's all worked around them. It's the right ability, the right skill level, right length.
So if we were to step back, we would say that for events that are for juniors or for youth, that should be the focus. There shouldn't be other things.
Yeah. If you want to do events, do them for juniors and do them well and make them junior specific, not as an afterthought. You want to have you want it to be something that's worth the kids' parents driving to.
I think if you can't have a junior specific event for generally for finances, if you can't have somebody underwrite it, we build out a block. So every race that we partner with in our CT Series of Cross, or what was formerly known as the Cliff Dirt Cup, the morning block was for the juniors only. So they had first crack at pre-ride, and we would lead a coached couple of laps on the course if it was a short course, and that block would go until 10 o'clock. So for cyclocross, the kids can arrive as early as 6:30 and ride the course if they want to. That's a deal we make with the promoters. And those kids have run of the course until 9:30, 10 o'clock. If we see any seniors on the course, they get DQ'd. There's no pre-riding. It's for the kids only. And then we'll set up a block for any seniors or masters who want to pre-ride before their race. We rub a couple of people the wrong way, but we're growing and the masters side is shrinking a bit. So it gives us a little bit more leverage, a lot.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And what about production value? I mean, you look at a NICA event and it has very high production value, relative to like a business park crit that we have here in Southern California.
Yeah, production value is huge. If you don't make it a spectacle, you don't have one thing that NBX in Rhode Island does really well, and we copied it, is when you walk into the registration area, they have a really great printed timetable of race starts. So when you have to be there for staging, when the race actually starts, and then the podium ceremony for each category. So everyone, including parents, will walk in, take a snapshot of that, and it'll get spread around via TeamSnap. So everyone's aware. And I think that's a really small thing that goes a long way, because no one wants to sit around and wait 2 hours for their results or not know when those results are going to be posted. I think it also keeps the promoter and the officials team a little bit honest to make sure they get those results cranked out in the right amount of time. So that definitely goes to the production. But having sponsors who actually show up and maybe have their tents, like what NICA does, they create a tent city and they encourage all the teams to come out and have team spirit. Without that, it's just another event.
I mean, so again, when I step back away from it, does it have to be a competition, or can it be something that's maybe a little bit more family oriented? I go to Gravel Grinders as a prime example. It's fairly organically derived, and people come out there, they can have a good time, but the front end of the event can be racing, right? I mean, and whatever that looks like.
I think it can be. I think if you don't want to try to be all things to all people, but you can certainly carve out those times throughout the year. So in the spring, depending on your weather, host that gravel event. And if you've got a central location, have some great amenities that keep people around, especially team tents and information sessions. I can only talk about our experiences from the last year, which really changed a lot of the ways we do things. Shifting to virtual events was tough, but we're trying to figure out how to have our annual breakaway benefit on May 1st this year and keep it safe. And so we're coming up with a pod system, and we're going to try and rotate people through the pods so they can experience. We're doing it at a private facility that has road riding and trails all in the facility. So we're going to try and rotate people to experience doing a short road loop, doing a mountain bike loop, doing a small cyclocross race. And I know that's more competition focused, but it's that's our focus, and we're trying to promote what we do. And we're trying to figure out ways to also add more fun components to that. Like we're going to build some teeter totters, and we'll build a mountain bike skills course. And we're asking our teams to join us in helping build that equipment.
So fun factor.
Yeah.
Chad, Lester, anybody else have any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, fun is huge. Kids races take a lot of passion for us because they're hard to break even, to get the permit, to pay all of us to set up like a fun little infrastructure in a park. So yeah, in our earlier year, it's gone in waves over the decades of us doing this fun race for the middle school and juniors. The passion, if one of us isn't stoked to do it that year, you can tell in the event. So, but yeah, we do little for our junior Devo that the U14ers do as well, but we have a little Factory Trails fun day where they all go to this park and we set up like a mini cross course with tape and stake and with like, older kid option lines, and we have them go over boulders, and sometimes there's like cross barriers or a policeman and they have to stop and then go. And we, the push bikers go first, and we have all the parents come. Oh yeah, and then we have our like sponsors have burritos, so the parents can buy burritos and stay and spectate and offset the cost. And then we have like a band, so we do music, try to like bring in different things for the families to stick. Oh yeah, we have like a dunk tank too. We hire this like dunk tank, and the kids can throw a ball and dunk their coach. So before each race, there's like
I'm stealing that. That's a great idea.
It's a pain in the ass though, but it's so worth it to have this huge dunk tank in the middle of a race course. But we don't do that every year because we're not as passionate every year, So that was my bottom thought, was like, it's so hard to run really cool kid events because you don't rake in money, and takes passion.
Yeah, what we do in Boulder, mountain biking, we don't put on any races because, believe it or not, there's nowhere around here. We've searched and searched and searched. We can't put on any races anywhere close to us. We're surrounded by mountains, and there's nowhere that we can race, and actually limited riding. Cyclocross, we put on a race at a private school that's successful. And then the other thing that's really big for us, that's without a doubt our most popular event and scaringly successful in terms of fundraisers, we do a bike-a-thon in the fall. And we have one of our coaches lives on a ranch, so we set up a course on his property. And we have all the kids come in, except for this year on a COVID year, but all the kids there, all the parents there, music, a lot to like what Chad was talking about, making a really fun experience. It's a cyclocross course, but they gotta run through and take a donut handoff. They go through the wall of foamies where all the parents are hitting kids with foamies, make them go underneath a barrier instead of over a barrier, stuff like that. And the kids in our case, it's a fundraiser. If they raise $100, they get this prize. They raise $300, you get this prize. $500, you get this prize. And it's without a doubt from every parent, every kid, and the coaches, it's the best event. We get everyone together, and it's just a big party, and people have a blast. Cyclocross is a lot easier to get with the younger, like the Devo under high school age kids. We have many more kids racing on cyclocross than we do on the mountain bike, just because there's a plethora of races within an hour and a half drive. Whereas for mountain biking, we're usually looking at a minimum 2-hour drive to get to a race. And we've looked for ages to find a location where we can put on a junior only mountain bike race, and we can't find a suitable location within a reasonable distance.
Anything else in that space? I mean, I don't want to go too long today. I mean, you know, we're gonna have another session tonight where we can touch on a lot of these other things. You know, I guess for you guys, I mean, you know, one good thing that we can just kind of bring up is, you know, the number of days per week and how long are the sessions. I mean, you guys all have kind of these, you know, pretty well developed programs. I mean, what does that look like with, you know, kind of these riders, middle school, high school age, but they're not really advanced yet? You know, what does that look like, you know, in terms of a training type of component? I mean, we've already got all this thing, and we got a lot of high skill building component, but you know, what does it look like when we're talking about building capacity?
We do kids ride with us. Our spring and summer programs are both about 8 weeks, give or take a week or two. And the kids come for 2 times a week, either a Monday, Wednesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday program. This is for Evo at high school. It's also 2 times a week, and it's 2-hour rides. And then once school's out, we recently moved to 3-hour rides for the younger kids, more to help give the parents a little more time. It's easier for them. They're looking for a half day camp for their kids. Though we're not a camp setup, we do, you know, an 8:30 to 11:30 twice a week. We don't let kids ride 4 days a week. They can't sign up for both. It's too much riding.
Any other comments? Chad's kind of walked off.
They're pretty similar.
Yeah, I think so.
Hey, Chad, how many days a week are you guys riding?
In the middle school age group, mainly like 2 days a week with the team. And they have the option in middle school, we design our teams around the other ball sports. So there's a lot of soccer kids and lacrosse kids. They're like every Tuesday, Thursday. So we went from offering just one huge every Monday and Wednesday U14 day to now we do a Monday, Wednesday, and a Tuesday, Thursday option. So we just split a huge, so a kid could do 4 days in a row if he wanted, which only 5 out of 40 do.
I mean, the general concept here is they're still multi-sport.
Yeah.
Cycling is just one piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
And then as you get into high school, what does it look like?
Anywhere from 3 to 5 days a week. And then there are options for 1 day a week too in the fall with the NICA program. So that's when we get more of our beginners, is around the school season. It just seems like we've never been able to catch beginners in the summer or not outside of school season. It's just something about school sport culture where you're able to grab beginners, and beginners are more apt to be like, oh yeah, school season, I'm going to do another activity. In the summer, it's more like we've turned our attention to camps, and we're like, well, we're just going to have a camp up at the ski mountain or the bike park, or we're going to have a camp here in town, and it's perfect for beginners. But we can never attract beginnerish riders in high school to like our weekly, 8 to 10 block team seasons. Even if there aren't serious races attached to those seasons, there's just not a lot of beginners who will dive into a big, 2-3 month team experience in high school.
Yeah, same for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's look at the summer for a second. If we talk about the summer and you're going to run these camps, and I think of the traditional sleepaway camp, whether it be YMCA or we have something called Astro Camp here that a lot of kids go to. Is that it's traditional kind of 2-week or 4-week block type thing, and you pay $700 to $1,000 per week for your kid to go to that. And are you picking up kids that are like, oh, I could go to bike camp and do this instead of going and doing something else?
We're definitely not doing that. We keep it as a club atmosphere, and we stress that we're not a camp. So we have pretty much the same kids that stay with us through the year, through the thing, and because we limit kids to 2 times a week. Something I should clarify too is that our high school kids meet 2 days a week for rides, but the more serious ones will be following a training program that's 4 or 5 days a week.
Sorry, guys, I gotta go. We'll see you
Okay.
later. Nice chatting with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could end there now, and the group will be picking up this, this evening too. So we'll come up, I think, with the rest of the pieces of the puzzle, unless anybody else has anything really, that they really want to get in at this point. Lester, anything else, any other golden nuggets?
No, I think some of the stress in minds that when I was started with BJC 15 years ago, we were 9 riders, and it was the NICA didn't exist, or Colorado League didn't exist, and really small long-term growth. And if I look at any sport, any of the smaller sports that are successful, it comes down to there's someone in that town, that city, who's passionate about it, and that's what causes that sport or that town to be a great location. Butte, Montana used to be the speed skating capital of the United States. Nothing special about Butte, Montana, other than there's a guy there, Mike, who was a passionate speed skating coach and was a national team coach, and that's why it produced 1,000 speed skaters. It's that having that local passion, and going back to it's got to be local driven.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I've, come to grips with over the years, that these, and it's a different conversation, as I think we'll get into it next week, is, what is the role of like a regionally based program? And the reality is they don't do anything for the sport. They just pick up riders that already exist in the ecosystem. Whereas programs like BJC are developing the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that I say, and I've done this in a couple of different sports, speed skating and cycling especially, is when it was volunteer driven, we had a great volunteer, but his bandwidth was only so wide. And once you start growing, unless you had someone already in place, already trained, already willing to jump on with that same level of passion, it would stagnate and you would lose people, and you would always stay the same size. And I was able to get around that by hiring coaches and training coaches, but you can also do it with volunteers, obviously. If you can find, but you need a team, you do it all yourself, you'll outgrow what you're capable of. I mean, I have 32 coaches working for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I'll just speak to that, GS Andiamo, it's driven by me and my wife and just a few of us. And we went from 0 to about 30 to 50 kids, really fast. And that's where we've been. Right. And I look at the growth patterns of, BJC and Durango, and I see you guys just moving forward, and you look at the difference between me and you guys, and it's that you have that extra piece, right? That you've professionalized the whole thing. And now, by having like we're still working in full, we're trying to flip the model now. So we'll see what happens over the next 3 to 5 years. But, we're volunteer based. We're not charging for anything. We're much more of a traditional club, whereas you guys are more of a tradition, more of a contemporary sporting operation that's pay for play. And that gives you additional resource base that now allows you to grow to a much larger extent than somebody like me, because I'm going to go flat.
Yeah, very much true. I mean, I started off with BJC as me and one other person, and I was a volunteer coach for 2 years. I wasn't expecting to be paid, and then it was just, and that's actually how I got into coaching as a career. I was coaching speed skating one night a week when I was 18 years old, and parents said, "Oh, can you come on Thursday as well?" I'm like, "That's when I work my job. I can't." They're like, "Well, if we pay you to be here," I'm like, "Sure." And that was launched me into changing my degree and my whole focus. But we have large growth, but it's very, very managed. Like it's very, very controlled. We do quality over quantity for sure. And say it's been 15 years to get to the point where we are now, and where we were now compared to 6 years ago is night and day different. a big part for me was getting the board to trust the board that we report to trust, hey, like, will you let me grow this, invest a little money and let me grow it. And it's been successful, but it's a long-term process, and you gotta, if you have 3 people, you might be limited to 30 riders. So do 30 riders to the best of your ability. Don't try and be 80 riders. Better off doing 30 really, really well than 80 in a poor way.
Right. But I'm looking at it from the perspective that we can't really service our community properly unless we start changing the model. And then associated with that, you have to bring in coaches, right? You have to have a training program for the coaches. You got to bring them up to speed and, to get all those other pieces of the puzzle in place.
Yeah, when I've run volunteer-based coaching programs, the problem is that it's hard to get mad at a volunteer if they, I can't make it on next week suddenly on the last minute's notice, and they're volunteering the time. But if it's a person's job, they have that level of responsibility. Not saying that volunteers can't do it, but it's hard to find volunteers with the same sort of passion you have, same sort of passion I have when I was volunteering it, to meet the demand, to be consistent and quality. And from my experience, having taken several programs from volunteer-based coaches to a paid program in 3 or 4 different locations, 3 or 4 different sports, most scenarios, parents are happier to pay a little bit of money to have someone there who's passionate and consistent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would say the same thing, having been involved in several different sports and having to go through both of those types of things.
Yeah, but it is a big jump, and it's I grew up in Canada where most sports are volunteer club driven.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming on. I really want to thank
Awesome.
you, Lester, for all your insights. It's very helpful, I think, for us moving forward. And we are going to be off for now, but we're going to have another session at 6 o'clock. I don't know that you guys all want to come back on, but I'll be here.
Yeah, I won't be able to make it.
All right.
Girlfriend's birthday. I better not do that one.
Nope. That's important.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right, you guys have a good one.
All right. Have a good afternoon, evening.